Dear Sergey Viktorovich, the President of the Russian Federation will visit China in the near future. Today, Beijing has shown that it is not afraid of US sanctions on relations with Russia. So what are the methods of Russia and China to form a new world order today?
Thank you very much. This is one of the key issues on today's agenda. Indeed, the struggle for the West to maintain its hegemony has entered such a very sharp stage. You mentioned that Beijing is not afraid of Western sanctions for cooperating with Russia. Not only that, but sanctions have been announced. Recently, I met with representatives of the European Union in Beijing. On the contrary, there was a meeting between Macron in Fries, and Ursula von der Leyen was there. In front of the Chinese guests, she said that China produced too much and should produce less. We will impose US sanctions or electric vehicle sanctions on electric vehicle batteries. So here, not only Russia, but also all those who want to show independence are punished by China. He has become a leader in world development. This is not suitable for SH, who, along with their satellites, has crushed the rest of the West and declared at the theoretical level that they cannot allow anyone to be more influential than Washington. Therefore, my Chinese colleagues and I are objectively interested in continuing to lead.
Поэтому мы с китайскими коллегами объективно заинтересованы в том, чтобы продолжать лидировать.
In the process of establishing a more just democratic world order, the West is only interested in democracy when it needs to interfere in the internal affairs of any other party. There, he recalled democracy and categorically rejected any form of equal cooperation in the international arena in flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations, which states that the United Nations is based on the sovereign equality of states. Well, in this case, of course, Russia and China are far from alone. The members of the group of friends are working together to reform the international system and promote the formation of a multipolar world order that reflects the real weight of countries and brings them together within the framework of the United Nations Charter. Of course, the BRICS members are all members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
С нами вместе, конечно же, члены БРИКС, члены Шанхайской организации сотрудничества.
After the expansion of the BRICS countries, we have more. Almost half of the G20 members are BRICS members or like-minded, so the G20 will also undergo positive changes in taking more fully into account the interests of all other regions of the world, not only the collective West, but also Russia and China. In addition to BRICS cooperation, the SCO has also received active support from other countries.
Безусловно, Россия и Китай, помимо сотрудничества в рамках БРИКС, ШОС, активно поддерживают другие
integration process. In the vast Eurasian continent, the SCO Eurasian Economic Union, SCO ASEAN Eurasian Economic Union also has a relationship with ASEAN. We and China are also developing this relationship. Russia has extensive ties with institutions such as the Gulf Cooperation Council. On other continents, the African Union and many sub-regional groupings are traditional partners of Russia and China.
Персидского залива, а если брать другие континенты, то на африканском континенте Африканский союз и многочисленные субрегиональные группировки являются традиционными партнерами России и Китая.
The same is true of Latin America, where the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, especially with the coming to power of President Lula in Brazil, has gained a second breath and is once again such a magnet for all countries in the region, as well as Russia and China. There is a relationship with this structure, so we have many allies, and the number will increase. I have no doubt that all this will be in the interest of democratizing international relations when everyone will take their place in world affairs for justice by making a real contribution to the development of the world economy and world politics and the world security system, rather than blackmailing the threat of ultimatums, as the West is now doing. So I can safely say that Moscow and Beijing are playing the most important role. This is where Moscow and Beijing play the most important balancing role in world affairs. I believe the Russian president's upcoming visit
взвешивающий, балансирующий роль в мировых делах, и уверен, что предстоящий визит президента России
The People's Republic of China will strengthen our joint efforts.
эту нашу совместную работу.
Thank you, Andrei Viktorovich Kutpov.
Dear Irina Ivanovna, dear Sergey Viktorovich, Russia has held the rotating presidency of the BRICS Union for 24 years. How is the implementation of the priorities of the Russian mission going? What do you see as the prospects of the BRICS countries?
Thanks to the Russian presidency, the main priorities are outlined in a fairly lengthy document. We plan about 200 activities in all areas of BRICS activities, which are in almost all areas of national interaction, from politics, security issues to healthcare.
Взаимодействие государств, начиная от политики, от вопросов безопасности и кончая здравоохранением, спортом, культурой, искусством.
Sports, culture, and art. Of course, we regard this as a major task, and we regard it as a strategic task to ensure that all BRICS mechanisms enter the work as smoothly as possible. According to the decision of last year's summit, the new members have become full members of our association since January 1st this year. They are Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Ethiopia. This is the most important task. It can be written in one line, but of course it takes daily effort. This work is already in full swing. Sherpas have met several times, and there have been some meetings in the field of industry cooperation. Generally speaking, we feel that the process is going on and the process is going well. Two, of course, the fundamental task is to ensure that our foreign policy coordination is strengthened on multilateral platforms. I would have mentioned the role I would have played. Like-minded people from our association are playing in the group of 20 at the United Nations, and we will continue to interact to strengthen foreign policy coordination. Targeting it for more specific actions, we will use the upcoming meeting with BRICS foreign ministers in Nizhny Novgorod in June. This is an important event which will be held for the first time in an expanded format. Of course, our focus will be on cooperation in the international arena and coordination of priorities. In dealing with the new challenges and threats of terrorism, drug trafficking, information crime, corruption and money laundering, the BRICS countries have established corresponding sectoral structures in all these fields. Well, another most important task is to establish dialogue with countries that have shown interest in rapprochement with the BRICS countries. Interest. From full membership to working partnerships, there are about 30 such countries. The question of how we strengthen dialogue with them will also be one of the main political priorities at last year's summit. Leaders decided to form a new type of partner for the country, and they will be called partners, which will replace them in many ways.
Страны-партнеры, они так и будут называться, которые, во многом заменит существующую до сих пор.
In addition to the existing form of BRICS interaction, we mean inviting a large number of heads of countries and regional organizations in the Global South to participate in the Nizhny Novgorod event through the diplomatic mission and the Kazan summit. These may be the main ones I have mentioned: the sporting events, the BRICS games, cultural exchanges, and we pay special attention to parliamentary diplomacy.
Спортивные мероприятия, игры БРИКС, культурные обмены. Особое внимание мы уделяем и парламентской дипломатии в июле.
The BRICS Parliamentary Forum is scheduled to be held in St. Petersburg in July. I know that the Federal Council is actively involved in its preparation, so there is enough case to case.
Thank you.
Vas Sergeyevich Ilyas Magomed Salamovich Umahanov.
Maybe thank you. Valentin Ivanovich, dear Sergey Viktorovich, I would like to thank you. Thanks to the systematic support of parliamentary public diplomacy, the cooperation with African countries has been significantly strengthened. I would like to ask how the implementation is going. Two Russia-Africa summit held in July last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. During the two summits, the President and the government took this issue as a priority, and there were not only a large number of plenary meetings, but also bilateral contacts and contacts with individual sub-regional structures on the African continent. All of this continues to develop in working mode. This is one of the main issues on the agenda, including the implementation of the Declaration and Plan of Action adopted at the second summit at that time. 5 documents were adopted between the African Union and the government of the Russian Federation. Of course, their goal is to develop practical interaction in the field, investment, trade, and the creation of new logistics chains. Transition to trade paid in national currencies or through the creation of alternative payment platforms. It works. The BRICS New Development Bank, headquartered in South Africa, certainly pays more attention to projects in African countries. We actively support this. Our participation is in the same direction. We joined the Export-Import Bank of Africa a few years ago. This is a useful mechanism for finding new investment opportunities and implementing mutually beneficial projects. Russian Export Center. It also helps to work in this direction. Well, there is a public structure, the Association for Economic Cooperation with Africa. We hope that it will be more actively implemented in practical actions to implement the agreement reached in St. Petersburg last July. This involves practical cooperation, the material basis for our interaction, but politically, of course, African countries, our allies, on many issues on the international agenda. Including defending the principles of the UN Charter, which the West wants to apply selectively when it needs something. One principle is taken as the basis when opposing goals are taken. A principle that is opposite to that interpreted by others. For example, when you know Crimea, there was a referendum. The West says this violates the principle of territorial integrity. When Kosovo declared unilateral independence without any referendum, we had already talked about the territorial integrity of Serbia. And the West said, no, this is the principle of self-determination of peoples. So we insisted that Africans support us in this regard. Because all principles of the Charter of the United Nations have always been applied in all their completeness and interrelatedness. Here, of course, they are our allies on many issues on the United Nations agenda, where we vote, and we are now working closely together on the Palestinian issue. So, in general, the horrors we have seen in the Gaza Strip, well, not in the past. In February of this year, African participants were among the most active in the framework of the Inter-Party Forum on combating new forms and practices of neocolonialism. They will also participate in the work of the structure created after the forum, and they have not shy away from its topic at all now. It has risen very, very sharply in various fields, but Africa, as an example of liberation from colonial dependence, is certainly leading the way in these fields. In these processes, we have maintained this trend. The last thing I want to say, in the light of all the factors I have pointed out today and many other factors, is that we are now entering the planned structural adjustment of our ministry to new realities. Particular attention will be paid to significantly increasing the share of these resources, including human resources and strengthening organizational capacity to work in Africa.
Thank you, Sergeyevich. Opana's help question. Maybe you want to conclude what to say, please.
Ivanovna, dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention. Do you work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? We have a lot of common undertakings, and I mentioned the Russian African Parliamentary Forum held in the United States. Parallel to a photo of Russia's summit, Africa parliamentarians are equally concerned about relations with other parts of the world, including Latin America. There was also a parliamentary forum on this topic last year, while Antonina Ivanovna personally launched many parliamentary diplomacy initiatives, including the Parliamentary Forum for women elected by the people, including interaction in the Asia-Pacific region, of course, within the framework of the CIS Interparliamentary Assembly. All of this has greatly strengthened our overall work to implement the foreign policy line approved by the President at the committee meeting yesterday. During our discussion, Valentina Ivanovna and her colleagues formulated a number of wishes that we have put into practice, including those related to the organization of practical activities in our foreign missions, including as far as there is certainly no limit to the development of our human resources here. We appreciate this attention and look forward to continued close interaction between the Ministry and the Federal Council.